Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees, which brings together diverse and unique voices from around the world to share their stories. If you like today's episode, remember to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a review. Here's your host, David Shunk.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees. Tonight, we're joined by an adoptive mother. Her name is Terry. She's down in the outskirts of D.C., down in the Maryland area of the United States. She adopted a young girl from Russia, and it's fun that we have a adoptive mother back on the show. We haven't had one since my mother was on the show, so that should be interesting. So, Terry, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, anytime. So, let's just dive right in. What chose you to adopt?
When we got married when we were a little bit older, and I ran into infertility. And so I really wanted children, and we tried a lot of different things and nothing worked. And finally, my infertility specialist said, "Do you want to be pregnant or do you want children?" I said, "I want children." And he said, "Well, then adopt." And so that's when we started going down the road to adoption.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to what my adoptive mother experienced as well. She was, I think, almost 40 years old, and they said, it's funny, they actually tried to adopt in the U.S., but the agency said that they were even at a certain age that they weren't really eligible, so they had to look at international adoption, which is kind of weird, but I don't know. Times are different back then. But
Right.
So part of your journey looking to adopt, how did you choose Russia out of all places?
Well, I've got four kids. So my first one, I went to Romania and got when that was because Ceausescu had been executed. They opened all the orphanages that he had put, kids in. There were just thousands of them. So me and my best friend went over there, and I brought back a little boy who was a little over one. And then we had also gone to D.C. trying to adopt through foster care, and had gone through classes for 6-8 weeks. And then after we went to the class, then nobody ever called us. So got Eric in March. And then in August, I got a phone call from a nurse who worked in DC and said, "There's a little baby here I know she's going to be put up for adoption." So I called, and God worked many miracles, and I was able to get Megan. We got her in October. And so then when I was in Romania, I met a man long story, I met a woman who said she was going to start an adoption agency in Russia. And so she called me when we got back. We started going through her, finally found out that she was taking all our money and the FBI was after her. So lost money, didn't get a child. But in the midst of this, I met a man named Ron Stoddard, who was also doing a adoption agency in Russia, and he seemed a little more legit. So that's when we decided to go to Russia.
Yeah, Ron's a good guy. He's awesome. So did you use him personally, or is this during his time at Nightlight when he was the director?
Yeah, we used him. Well, we used Nightlight, but we got to know him personally. In fact, he came here. We had two, after we adopted Kelsey and Chris, we had two picnics, and Ron came, and so we got to know him personally. And then he did Nightlight, and then he did Operation Snowflake, where he adopts out fertilized eggs. So
right, and they called that Snowflake adoption. That was their nickname. Yeah, that's interesting. So, in what ways has adopting children changed your life? In ways where maybe if you had biological children, they wouldn't, or have you ever thought about that?
Well, one of the things we came back, we were just really excited about it, with all four of them, just excited about adoption. So we started talking about adoption in our church, and we ended up probably with about 10 couples in our church adopting, particularly from Russia, friends of ours who also went through Ron and Nightlight and adopted. So I've always had now a heart towards adoption. I had never really thought about it beforehand until, the doctor said, "Be pregnant or get children." I said, "Children? Who wants to be pregnant necessarily?"
Sorry, I don't have experience, so I can't help you there. But
No. Well, neither do I. So but I didn't look real fun to me. But
I don't know. They always say it's the best moment of their life. I'm
I
thinking,
know.
wow, your
Yeah.
life sure must be not that good. No, I'm just kidding.
So I think that's what, I mean, after that, I've always had a heart towards adoption, encourage people. I encouraged one family to do Operation Snowflake, and they were able to they got the fertilized egg and they had somebody else carry it for them. So, but they've
Hmm.
got the baby now.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. So basically, the egg was it was delivered, and then they let the baby grow inside the woman, and then the baby was theirs. That got it. Did you have any concerns getting into adopting children? Did you have any second thoughts before you ended up going to get children, all your different kids?
Yeah, I mean, number one, when I went to Romania, I went with another woman, and we met a Christian missionary who I had never met in my life. So we flew to Austria and then drove to Romania, not knowing anybody. We went with a group of pastors. I didn't know any of them, and driving over, all the way to Romania, and we had no idea who we were going to adopt. They just said there were children. Come look around and find them. So that was a bit scary. I was probably scared the whole time. So, and a lot of times and in Romania, people would offer you children and they would say, we have a baby for you or a 2-year-old. And then when you go to their little house, and they lived in little gross huts. And then when we got to the house, there would be a 16-year-old they wanted us to adopt, because basically they wanted us to get them over to America. So
Uh,
yeah, Romania was pretty scary. We got Megan from DC. The only thing scary about that was we had to foster care her for a year with the possibility of adoption. So I was never sure until, we finalized it, which took 3 years in America to finalize it, that we were really going to get Megan. With Chris and Kelsey, the only thing scary then was their medical records, which the Russians lied on, because they had two diseases, one on Kelsey's and one on Chris's. And when I took it to the doctor to have them look at, there was no such disease. They had just made it up because they wanted to be able to get kids out of Russia, that they said, oh, these kids are all sick and they have this and that. And so we don't care to keep them.
yeah, that's very very common. Yep, my parents told me the same thing. At the time, I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed. The government wasn't really functioning 100% half the time, and to get kids to be eligible, even to be placed for adoption, they had to be basically deemed unhealthy or not recommended for Russian families. So that's how they got him out of the country. I mean, I had supposedly that they said I had hydrocephalic, which is water in the brain.
Yeah, and so did Chris, but there was some other thing, and I can't remember the name of it. But
Club feet.
no, she didn't have club feet.
Okay, well, they had a lot of random things, and
Yeah. Oh, they had tons of it, and it was just funny because when we first got Chris, I called Ron and I said, Ron, because he had met Chris, he had gone over there, he took videos of him, and I said, you never mentioned, all these. And he said, that's just, a lie. It's not true. That's, and we had watched Chris on the video, and he didn't seem anything they said.
yeah.
So then when we got the medical record on Kelsey, and I said, look, Mark, same thing. So we knew that they were, other than she had crossed eyes.
Right. I feel like every Russian adoptee had that.
Crossed eyes.
I had corrective eye surgery because it was bad when I came here, and even then, it's still when there are times where I get really tired, my eye will start to just move, and I'm like it's.
She had to have it twice.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Another big medical diagnosis was club feet, and it was pretty funny because my parents are veterinarians, and when my mom went over there, they didn't understand like veterinarian doctor. They're like, it's close enough, right? So literally, the staff at the orphanage started holding up babies and saying like, does she look like she has club feet? And my mom's like, I don't know. No. It's like, okay.
How old were you when you were adopted, David?
I was almost 2. So I was pretty young.
Kelsey was almost 4, but she only weighed like 90 pounds. She was tiny, tiny.
Yeah.
Not 90 pounds. She was 20 pounds. Yeah, so 90. That would have been, she was a little chunko. 20 pounds. So she was tiny and
little Russian potato. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. More like a Russian piece of celery, just, So, and she didn't speak Russian, and they said, we don't know if she'll ever learn English. So that made me a little nervous, but I was trusting God. And she came over, and it was soon after she was just talking and talking and has never stopped talking.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, have you been back to Russia since the adoption?
No, because Mark went over and got Chris, and I went and got Kelsey. No, never been back. I want them to go back. I would like for Chris and Kelsey to go to St. Petersburg. It's a beautiful city. It was pretty run down. I was there, but it still had the potential. And I know that they've done, because they were working on Moscow at the same time. And of course, we had to take the train there and stayed with a Russian family there who was just lovely. I mean, everybody there was nice as they could be.
Yeah.
Have you been back?
Yeah, I have. I have almost 10 years now. It's crazy, but
Okay.
I haven't been there for a while, but it's just magical. It was just unbelievable. I mean, I was like, you expect a certain like outcome, and it's not even close to what you imagine, and the whole trip went by so quickly, but it still feels like a whole kind of fairy tale. But it's the reason why I asked if you went back to Russia, and a follow-up question would be, have you ever considered going with your children back to Russia? Maybe like on a one-on-one with Kelsey back to Russia. Explore it together, maybe.
Yeah, there would be. I mean, I'd love to go back. Where were you born?
Smolensk. So it's right on the border of Belarus in Russia. So if you literally go into the capital and you go directly west toward Belarus, we're the last main city.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, she was there. She and Chris were born in St. Petersburg. And of course, it's got the Hermitage Museum, which is one of the best museums supposed to be in the world. And, we got to go through there, and it's just got beautiful cathedrals and churches, and then, Moscow itself was unique. So, yeah, I'd like to go back. It's, somebody would give us the money, we would, would go in a minute, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. While your adopted kids grew up, in your family, did they ever seem interested in their Russian roots, or did they not?
Oh, well, a little bit. I mean, not, I don't know. They've got, I brought back some of the Russian things, the little dolls, and I got some books, and, we've talked about it, and I've told them what St. Petersburg looked like, and, how beautiful it was. And Chris, we tried to get to learn Russian. He knew Russian when he came over, and within 6 months, he had completely, stopped Russian and learned English. He didn't want to speak Russian anymore. And we had a lady coming over who would try to help him, but they didn't like her. Yeah. So Rosa. And never tried with Kelsey. But I mean, Kelsey started learning English by singing almost immediately, but they neither one, knew Russian. I think Chris, particularly because he was 6 going on 7, he really wanted to be an American. So he did go back and take Russian, and he can understand it a little bit. He can speak a little bit, but not much. So I wouldn't say a great deal.
Okay. When you were getting Kelsey and Chris in Russia, what was your favorite memory of Russia in general?
I think the churches. I just think they were beautiful, just the way they need. Some of them they needed fixing up or painting, but I just think the church is unique. And I mean, it's really a pretty country, and the city, like I said, St. Petersburg was beautiful. The Hermitage I love, but we had 1 hour, and I think they have, I can't remember, 2 million items in it, so we went just flying through. So I mean, things like some of the most famous paintings, that exist are there. The real ones in DC. It's always the print, and in there they had the real ones because I guess Catherine the Great collected them all and put them there. So
Yeah, well, St. Petersburg is home to a lot of history through Catherine the Great and the Romanov period, and then World War II, and yeah, that's crazy to think about. It's cool to think about that people actually are from these areas where you're in a classroom setting and you learn about it, and then to realize like, wow, you're probably thinking, oh, they're learning about World War II, like that's where I got my kids from. Like they were in the same city that big war was at. It's crazy. So as Kelsey was already on the show and we interviewed her and we know her story, and I assume that, she went looking for her family in Russia. What were your thoughts originally when she wanted to go looking? Did you have any doubt or any?
No, I was really glad because, in fact, all three of, well, her brother and her sister have all looked. Chris, her other brother, I think he went on the adoption page, but he never got any response, anything back, and he never seemed to be, oh well, But I actually went. Somebody gave us the money for me to fly back to Romania with Eric, and he met his grandmother and his sister and his uncle and aunt. And then Megan, her sister, who was the one we adopted in DC, met her, let's see, her aunt, her cousin, her brother, her sister. So when Kelsey did this, and tried to find her brothers and found her brothers, and then recently found her sister and brother, I was thrilled. I thought it was great. I'm glad they did it. I think it sometimes fills a hole, that maybe they've had. So I was happy for them. I cried.
Aw. Well, that's great. What's your opinion about adoptive parents that discourage their children from looking into their roots and into their other family abroad?
Well, I just think that, like I said, I think there's probably a little bit of something, a hole or an emptiness when you don't know where, okay, where was I born? And I say St. Petersburg, and she has no idea, or who was my mother or who are my relatives. I think it helps. To me, it helped the kids to be able to know and see and meet and, talk to her brother and she met her sister and her two, in fact, she has two nieces and her brother in Washington. Is that where he is?
No, he's in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah. So I just think it helps to fulfill, if there's been any, because I think a lot of kids I read about, I know about, they never said tons about it, like, oh, I've got this big hole and I don't know. But I just think most adopted kids do. And so to me, I would always encourage parents, I was never afraid, like, oh my gosh, Kelsey's going to choose her brothers over us, or, maybe because they're in Russia. And, I don't, but even with Megan, her family is in DC, in the United States. And I just never had a fear that she would say, pooey on you, Mom. I'm gonna go find my other
in her
family.
Teenage years, you kind of wondered,
maybe,
though.
yeah. Teenage years could be a little rough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's everyone can relate to that. But I'm curious because I've always found it interesting how some adoptive parents tend to, not be favoring the fact that they have kids who are adopted and they're going to want to go find their other family one day or their relatives. We hear, unfortunately, negative stories about the adoptive mother getting very territorial and thinking, why do you need to go find your birth mom? I'm your mother. I'm right here. She's not, right? But part of me feels, in the adoptee's defense, part of me feels like if you're adopting me, you should know that you're adopting a child that is from somewhere else, and that whole side is not your side technically, and you need to at least be aware of that, because everybody wants to feel identity. They want to feel and know where they are from and belong. It's part of who you are. And I just never understood that, how some adoptive parents just don't seem to grasp that idea. And I'm lucky. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that if they do, I think they're afraid. They're afraid that their daughter or son will say, Mom, it was nice being here for the last, 18 years, but I'm sure. And yet I haven't, in all the people that we know that have adopted, and some of them have had hard times, but I've never heard any of them leave their adopted family to go, back to their birth family, even though they've met their birth family 18, 20 years later. It's always been, I met them and I'm glad we met and it was good. And, but I don't think you'd want to fly over and live with your brother, would you?
No.
So I'm curious, what would you say if maybe one day Kelsey decided to adopt a child of her own? After what you have experienced,
right?
Would you give her some wisdom?
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I mean, I have given other people wisdom that I think a lot of adopted kids would benefit from counseling. And I wish we had started counseling, because I do feel like that, there's part, particularly with one of my kids, I think they experience a feeling of rejection. Their mom gave them away, and why. And particularly when they became teenagers and they realized, okay, I can have a baby now, but I want to give my baby away. And so I think that we should have started counseling earlier so they understand, what sometimes birth families go through and almost have to give up a baby. They can't, they can't either mentally take care of them or physically, or, lots of reasons, they've got drug problems or whatever. And so I think that would help, and to help them understand too, as an adopted parent, what we, feel. So I think if Kelsey ever decided, that's what I think I would advise her, and I don't mean at 2 years old, but, maybe when they're 7 or 8, they have counseling to start on that, just to begin to understand, so that when they are teenagers, to me, that's when most of them start going through hard times.
Yeah. You brought up a lot of good points, and I'm not sure about how all your kids feel, but I agree with that statement. It definitely took until I got, I'd say, high school age, middle school age, to finally think more about, I'm actually from another country, because before that, it's not that I just didn't have interest. It honestly didn't cross my mind much.
Right.
So I don't know. Everyone's different, but
And they had some friends there. In fact, our best friends at the time were adopted. My best friend, who I went to Romania with, adopted 2 boys, and then her mom adopted a little girl from Richmond and got her at the same time we got Chris, the same day. And so we used to always have an adoption day. It was like a birthday party, but it was the day that we, so
yeah, your gotcha day.
Yeah. We celebrated the adoption. And then they also knew that we were helping other people to adopt. So I don't think they ever thought, that we ever looked like, oh, we had to adopt, or, wish we could have had, our own children, birth children. So I think because maybe we made a bigger thing of it, it was sort of and a lot of people at the church made them feel like, like, hey, y'all are special. This is.
That was actually going to be my next question, was how did, your close friends and community during the adoption process and then welcoming these kids home, were they very positive for it with you, supporting you through this?
At the beginning, always at the beginning, when we came flying in, there were, tons of people at the airport, and they would have signs up, and they were very supportive. They thought I was crazy to do 4 children, but once they met Kelsey, they knew why I did, because she's so sweet, and they all thought she was so cute, even though she had crossed eyes. She was. When they started going through high school and having some troubles, just from, I think, from facing the adoption, and why did my parents want me? That was the biggest thing. Why was I given up? I think then people were like, well, you chose to adopt them and you got to deal with it. So that kind of thing got hard then.
Yeah. So if you were to meet another adoptive parent who happened to adopt a child from Russia too, how would you begin that conversation?
Well, I know that my thing is, I know a bunch of people who have adopted from Russia, and I probably just ask them questions like I'd ask from here. Oh, where were you born, or where was your child born? Where, what city? Oh, where, like I asked you, where is that located? How old was the child, and how has it been that you had to adopt? I think I would ask that. Just all you're asking me, but I think that's what I would do.
When it came to health records, did it ever make you upset that you didn't have enough information from the orphanage or from the adoption process?
It upset me that I realized that when we got Kelsey and comparing it with Chris's, that they, and they had said the same thing about Chris's, that it wasn't true, so a lot of what we got, we didn't know. She didn't know till things started even happening recently, that, and it took me a long time. She was very little, tiny. And so we had to try to make her grow, fatten her up. And also I got genotrophin, but she had to fall in such a specific, how big she was, how long she was when she was born, which we had, how much she weighed. And so it happened to be that she fit that. And so she was able to get that. So she probably grew, I think, 3.5 inches taller than she would have. But, well, and she also had parasites when she came over, which made her be real sick her first year. And she didn't gain any weight. Chris, on the other hand, didn't have them. So he came over tiny, tiny. He was the same size as his brother, who was 4, but he gained and grew, boom, 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 and she didn't. So it took us forever to find out what was wrong with her. And then when we did and got that taken care of, then she started to grow. And
yeah, actually, speaking of health and all that, Kelsey and I had a conversation a couple months ago of our experiences going through H. pylori and how apparently that's very, very common. I mean, I'd never even heard of it until the doctors just literally said, "Oh, by the way, we did a blood test. Or, do you know have H. pylori?" I'm like, "What's that?" They're just like, "Oh, it's just a stomach thing. It's very common if you weren't born in this country." I'm like,
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they said, I mean, they told Kelsey that it could have been from the parasites and all. So you might have parasites and didn't know it.
maybe, yeah. Couple more questions for you. If you were to travel back to Russia with Kelsey or Chris, where would you like to go in Russia? Like, what sites would you like to show them?
Well, I definitely like to go through St. Petersburg because that's where they were born. I mean, we've got videos of the hospital, but it would be, if the hospital's still there, it'd be nice to just go and see it. But all, the Hermitage and the different churches. And again, I didn't have obviously very long in St. Petersburg because we were over there and then we had to take the train to Moscow. I'd like to go back to Moscow. I thought that, Red Square and all that was extremely interesting and pretty and but again, we were only in Moscow for 3 days maybe, so it wasn't like we had a long time to tour. So I mean, those two places mainly. I'd have to look it up and see other, I don't know, maybe your city.
Why not? Do you like Russian food at all?
They love, well, I've made them borscht, and it's all right, with the cabbage and
The beets, yeah.
What about the Romanian food?
the Romanian food was, I was over in Romania from January through March trying to get a child. And this was in dead of winter. So it was like, sometimes 40 below zero. But also the food, I was staying with a pastor's friends. And so they would cook us meals, but it was the greasiest. I mean, grease would just slime roll down. And, so we had one time they had eggplant and it was just looked like they had just dumped it in grease. So Kathy, when they left the room, Kathy and I wrapped it up in a paper towel or a napkin and stuffed it in our pocket. So, because they were giving you their best food. I mean, and so you didn't dare say yuck or, spit it out or something, but I couldn't eat it. It was so bad. Kathy liked everything, except for that. But I think I lost weight while I was over there. So, yeah, the food in Russia, as far as I remember, was good. I had borscht at this. We stayed in Moscow. We stayed with a family, and they cooked borscht, and I liked it. And borscht, and I think we had sausage. The other place, I don't even remember what we had. Some kind of soup.
So like a cabbage soup, maybe, or
maybe. I remember there was a lot of cabbage.
But they just throw that in everything called borscht. I mean, when I had one of the places in Russia I stopped was my grandmother's house actually, and borscht is famous for its red color, and
yeah.
This soup was about as brown as you could get. And I'm like, "What is this?" And she's like, "Oh, it's borscht." I'm like, "Okay,"
Where's she from?
So my grandmother was born in the Demidova region. It's just north of Smolensk, but for the most part, my mother's side of the family is all from Smolensk, which is nice. Besides a cousin that apparently one of my birth mother's, so my birth mother's cousin actually lives in the United States, in Florida, and I talk to her all the time, and she's great. So it just happened that way. It's awesome, but
that's neat.
Yeah, it is neat. So. Two questions, and that's all I have left for you. The first question would be, if you were to do this whole process over again, would you do it the exact same way, or would you do something differently?
Good question. Well, when we started, we were older. That was against us because a lot of places won't let you adopt if you're older. I think I was 39 when we started, and so when they were looking in DC, looking for anybody to come down in foster care with the intent to adopt. So that's why we did that. Most of the babies down there are Black or biracial. Obviously, we're white. And so that was a problem, even though we said we would take a Black or biracial baby. We have a friend of ours who's Black, and she has lived with us for 33 years, and she was living with us then, and our neighbors were Black. So our church was pretty integrated. So it wasn't like we were bringing a child into a totally white neighborhood or white family. But that was the one way I told you we never got called. So would I have done that again? I mean, because it ended up well, but took miracle after miracle after miracle to go. And again, to go to Romania, we went over there not knowing who we were. I didn't go knowing the name of a child. In fact, after we got the boys, okay, we got 3 little boys, and then we went to Bucharest and we went to the embassy. And the day before that, and we had gone over with our husband, giving us a power of attorney to adopt. That was all, because we didn't know who we were going to adopt. We weren't, So the day before we got to the embassy, the American Congress had passed a law saying that you could, because of Romania mainly, that you couldn't just go over there and say you can adopt anybody. You had to have their name. So we had to go through all this rigmarole that we had to have my husband and her husband go to this place, a friend of ours who, got the birth certificates remade for Eric and the 2 boys. Then Mark had to fly to New York. They had to fly from New York to Bucharest to get the papers to us. And we had to go to the embassy the next day. We were the first people with these papers with their names on. The lady was like, how you do this so fast? How you do this? So that was the only way we could. So it was, and I said we were up and living in this little house. It was 30 degrees below zero. We were out in the snow. When we went out in the snow, we got in they made the roads clear by two by fours on the back of horses, and then we had this little car behind, and I don't like riding in the snow anyway. And here we are riding in the snow, and this man drove like 90 miles an hour. And I thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm trying to adopt. So, the things that I think about. And then with Chris and Kelsey, it was more normal adoption. We knew their names. We had seen them, and we had somebody meeting us over there and guiding us. And so that would have been an easier to do that. If somebody asked me, I would say, yeah, you make sure you get a good adoption agency who knows the people who are over there, who knows the kids, and that they will meet you and guide you through and, get you back home safely. Because in Romania, I wasn't sure I was ever going to get back home. So the first 2 were a little on the nutty side, not the 2 kids, but the nutty experiences. The last 2 were easier.
Yeah. Your responses about, people driving fast, not wanting to die, that's common. I mean, my mom told me the same thing. And even when we went back to Russia, there was one point we were going up this steep road out of my city. My uncle was driving. He was going like, who knows, 80, 90. And there were full semi trucks, and he would just blindly just go around them, not looking behind him. And I thought it was hilarious. I was having a blast. We had Russian music playing really loud, and everyone was having a good time. And I kid you not, my mom leaned over to me, grabbed my arm, and pulled me to her. And with the straightest tone I've ever heard, she's like, David, I don't want to die in this country. I'm not even kidding. She said that. Yep.
Yeah. Many times I felt that way. And Kathy and I were, then they took us to just some of the weirdest places to adopt. And, it was one time we got a phone call from somebody. I couldn't understand because they were speaking Romanian, but he goes, Radu was his name. Radu said, come. And it was like, 7 feet of snow outside. So he had a van that the pastor had given him. So and they had cleared the roads with these 2x4s. So we got in the van. And again, he was one of the ones, in snow, 7 feet, we were going 70 miles an hour. And I thought, And
They're crazy.
the girl who came with me didn't want to go that day, so I was with me and nobody who spoke any English, except and so even if I'd yelled out, "I'm gonna die," they wouldn't have known what I was saying. And then we had to park, and then I had to walk maybe a half a mile through a blizzard. I felt like it was Dr. Zhivago, and I got to the house, and it was this little bitty house, and they had fireplace, so it was smoke. I mean, smoke. You walked in, there must have been, I don't know, 12 people in there. And I could hear the baby. That's the one I thought I was going to get. So I went over and there were a bunch of kids. And so I had brought suckers. I was giving out the suckers to all the little children. And then I saw the baby. And just as I'm getting ready to lean over to touch the baby, something, Radu, my translator, except he doesn't speak English. The person who's our house came over and he said, come, go. And I'm like, well, what? Here's the baby. What? No, go. So I had to walk the half a mile through the snow again. He remember, he can't speak to me. I don't know. I'm like, what's happening? And we got in the car at 70 miles an hour back around thing. Finally, we got back to the house. I was alive, and we went in, and he explained to the girl who was my interpreter that when they got there, they said they had changed their mind. They didn't want to give me the baby. They wanted to give me their 16-year-old daughter. And he knew I didn't want a 16-year-old daughter. And he also knew that what they were planning, what he said was they were going to send their 16, 17-year-old. So as soon as they turned 18, they could have them come to America. They could bring their family over. So that's, one of the nutso experiences. There were several, but I said with Kelsey and with Chris, it was just, we stayed with nice people, and we had, I had a wonderful guy who spoke English and Romanian and still drove pretty fast. Even he drove pretty fast. I don't think they all drive faster. And little cars. So if you did crash, you didn't stand a chance, except the van. But David was his name that drove me around with Kelsey. And the people at the orphanage were nice as they could be. They put a big bow on her head. She didn't have enough hair to tie them, so they taped the bow on her. But that was just more normal. Then we had to take the train down to Moscow and go through the embassy, which made me a little nervous after the embassy in Romania. But the embassy in Russia, they were very nice, and there was no complications, and nice to get on the plane, and it was nice to fly back to the United States. So even then, because there were still, when we were over, we adopted you in 1991, 96. Okay. And it was still a little like you saw a lot of the communist soldiers, and they all looked like they were going to shoot me, and so that made me a little nervous.
Yeah, my mom said the same thing. She traveled to Russia with her mom to get me. So on the way back to the U.S., they stopped in Germany for a layover. And because I was a Russian citizen, I wasn't an American citizen yet. I couldn't leave the international terminal. And this was right after, like Berlin Wall went down like 5-6 years ago. But anyway, Germany was still divided, and you had the communists like on one side of the airport with literally machine guns standing there who would but they were friendly with American citizens. So my mom had this like predicament where she had to trade with her mom, because she'd be like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom, but I can't bring my baby of a son with me because apparently he's a Russian citizen and they won't let me. So, because he's such a threat at his age. I mean, but
yeah, that's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
It's crazy. I got one final question for you, and that is, as an adoptive parent, what advice would you give to other adoptive parents who have adopted children or are thinking about adopting children?
Well, again, I think I would recommend counseling when they were younger. I said maybe 8 years old when they start to begin to really understand about adoption, 8 or 9. And so that they can talk about it and begin to express their feelings. And if you had the money, I would have them go back to their country. Like I said, I've encouraged Chris and Kelsey to go back, still do. So, maybe on your honeymoon. Yeah. And I'd love to. We just haven't had the money to do it. And so I think that would be a big thing. I think to celebrate adoption, I think that was good. for them because it looked like it was a good thing. It was like it wasn't, and it was a good thing. It was I still feel like it was a wonderful God-given thing that we got to adopt 4 kids. And so I think I would say celebrate it, have, Gotcha Day or Adoption Day, and also that way also try to meet other kids that are adopted. So they have friendships that other kids are adopted so that they don't feel like so unique. I'm the only one, everybody else has a birth parent and I'm the only adopted one. So I would encourage if they could do that, that would be a great thing.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight, sharing your wow, your story. I mean, if you want to take over the show, be my guest. But
you do a great job. I heard you the other day.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we appreciate you coming on, sharing. We need more adoptive parents to come out there and give their side. We've been hearing mostly adoptees, but it's nice. Like I said, I got my mom on the show a few weeks ago, and you're the second one, so that's going to be awesome. I'll tell her to listen to it, and I'm sure she'll love it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Kelsey, we have other friends who've adopted from Russia. That Ton would probably.
Yeah, we could, right? Leanna,
yeah.
There's quite a few.
Yeah.
Yep.
That she could get the parents.
Great. Well, as long as we spread the word and pass it on, that's what we're trying to do. But again, thank you so much for your time.
You're so
I really
welcome.
appreciate it, and I'll be sure to. I'll be down in the area soon, probably. So love to get.
Give a call a couple of days before, and don't call her. Call me.
You got it. No problem. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Voice of Adoptees. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review. See you next time.